We are tracking Hurricane Helene. Chief Meteorologist Tim Buckley here with you, wanting to explain where the storm is, where it's going, and what it's all going to mean for us specifically in North Carolina. The impacts with this storm are actually going to extend over a really large area, a lot larger than usual when it comes to a tropical system, and there are a couple of reasons for that. Let's dive into the details. All of this information is current as of Wednesday at about 6 o'clock in the evening. So if it's a little bit later than that, you're watching this later, seek out a refresh and an updated video. We'll certainly be posting them throughout the storm. As of that 5 o'clock advisory on Wednesday, winds have increased. It's now a hurricane. It was a tropical storm earlier on Wednesday, but only getting stronger. It's now moving into the Gulf of Mexico. It's a Category 1 storm. We rate hurricanes on a 5-point scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and 85 miles per hour is just above hurricane strength. Keep that in mind. This thing is going to increase by a lot going into tomorrow. The position is moving to the north at about 12 miles per hour. This time yesterday, it was still moving to the west-northwest. So it started to take a bit of a turn. We expected it to go north like this. Next up, it'll start to go to the north and to the east. If we take a zoomed in view of this, you'll get an eye for the development, the organization of the storm, and also that location. This right here is the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. This is where places like Cancun and Cozumel are located. They've had some really rough weather over the last 24 hours dealing with what was Tropical Storm Helene. That's the western tip of Cuba over there, and you'll notice this spinning eye-like feature. It hasn't developed an eye yet, but it probably will as it gets a little bit stronger over the next few days, but it's plain to see where that storm center is located and spinning right now. If we widen out the view, you'll notice just how big of a storm this is on scale. It is hundreds of miles wide from west to east and north to south too. In fact, some of the clouds already from the storm are spreading into places like South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. There's nothing bad about them, but that just shows you the organization of the system. On the northern side, we're actually getting an interesting feature. It's a pre-storm rainfall event, and it's really bad news for much of the southeast. I'm switching to a feature here that we call the water vapor loop. What it is, it tracks how the moisture is moving through the atmosphere. I kind of like to think of it as an X-ray for the atmosphere. And what we're seeing is that movement, the drier air indicated here with those oranges and yellows, and the moisture and the humidity indicated by the whiter colors and the bluish greenish colors as well. You'll notice there's a big dip right here in the jet stream that's going northward at this point. So what the motion is doing is it's pulling off and kind of pinning off some of the moisture from the hurricane and pulling it into the southeast. So places like Georgia, western North Carolina, eastern Tennessee, parts of South Carolina, they're already getting rain from that. And we can prove that to you when we switch to the radar feature. You'll see all of that tropical moisture getting pulled up, and there's a stationary front sitting right there just helping to focus it. So bottom line, these areas are already getting a lot of rain, and it's not going to stop. Not until that hurricane gets up and through the area, which will be happening by Friday afternoon and evening. It's no wonder why flash flooding is such a big concern. Remember, the tallest mountains on the east coast of the United States are in North Carolina, Tennessee, 5,000 to 6,000 feet at times. And when you're forcing all that moisture to rise and ascend, you're only going to squeeze out more of that rainfall and get it at higher rates as well. So a big time dangerous flooding setup already has begun for North Carolina mountains and will continue all the way through Friday until Helene goes away. Let's show you the forecast cone. Again, the forecast does call for rapid intensification of this storm system, and this is new now. They're considering it to be a Category 4 hurricane by this time tomorrow. So on Thursday afternoon and Thursday evening, the forecast calls for it to have about 130 mile-per-hour winds, a Category 4 strength. And then from there, it would hit somewhere in this Florida Panhandle area. You can see that's what they call the Panhandle. That's the peninsula. This region is known as the Big Bend of Florida. Tallahassee is right about here. That's about the closest major city pinpointed on this landfall track right now. And again, a Cat 4 is no joke. In fact, looking back at the history records, there aren't too many hurricanes of this kind of strength that have hit this part of the Florida Panhandle. What's also noteworthy is that it is still forecast to be a Category 1 hurricane with winds of 80 miles per hour when it goes inland into Georgia. That's pretty rare. Remember, hurricanes, they actually feed off of warm ocean water, which is why they usually weaken very fast moving over land. The problem is, Helene is a fast mover. So when it moves very quickly, it does not have a lot of time to weaken. It'll take a while, and that is to Georgia's detriment here. They're going to have tough weather for sure, to say the least, on Friday. Hurricane conditions extending into the middle of the state. It'll move right through Atlanta into Tennessee. Now, you might look at this and say, we are all good here in North and South Carolina. Far from the case. Remember what I was saying earlier. We just looked at how big the storm is on satellite. That cone is only showing where the center of the storm is expected to go. And most of the impacts with a hurricane are usually on the right-hand side. We call it the dirty side of a storm. You have spinning air on that part, and in our case, the geography allows moisture to be pulled in from the Atlantic Ocean too. And so there's going to be a lot of rain, a lot of wind, and also the potential for some tornadoes. So that's what we're watching as we go into Friday. These are your tropical storm warnings and hurricane warnings. Tropical storm warnings cover the entire state of South Carolina. They can cover most of western North Carolina too, all of Georgia, except for right here where hurricane warnings extend as far north as Macon. Very unusual for that part of the country, of course. There's the rainfall that's going to continue the rest of the day today on our Wednesday, all the way through tonight and into the day on Thursday too. Flash flooding is likely and will continue to get worse until the storm pushes on by. For us here in the Piedmont of North Carolina, we will have occasional showers and storms through Thursday, but not all the time. It'll actually be fairly dry at times on Thursday. But watching Friday morning, that's when we get some of those heaviest rain bands that'll push into our area, and they will mean business. In those, you're looking at heavy downpours and also the threat of some spin-up tornadoes that we can see in tropical systems from time to time, and also gusty winds of about 35 to 45 miles per hour. Taking a closer view, you'll see the constant downpours for Thursday morning, of course. As we go throughout the day on Thursday, some of those rain bands will start to move into the Piedmont Triad. Meanwhile, eastern North Carolina is doing just fine with not all that much going on. Then Friday morning is the big event that we have to all watch for. This is when flash flooding will be most likely. This is when power outages will be a possibility for us and pretty much a sure thing out to the west. Also have to watch for tornadoes during that time as well. We will be staffed up and covering you as much as we need to throughout the day on Friday until that storm goes away. The good news is that the weekend is actually looking pretty nice going into your Saturday. The flash flooding risk, we talked about this already. This is for Wednesday night into early Thursday morning, a rare high risk of flash flooding for the mountain areas. And then on Thursday into early Friday morning, it only gets worse. There's just more and more of that rainfall going into the western Carolinas. For us here in the Piedmont, we're mostly looking at Friday morning into midday for that risk of flash flooding with those tropical rain bands that'll be moving on into the area. The rain forecast looks something like this. You can see about an extra 1 to 2 inches to maybe 3 inches in parts of the Triad area or so. Farther out to the west of us, places like the foothills, they could see upwards of 3, 4, and even 5 inches of rain. And the North Carolina mountains, as much as a foot of rain in those higher peaks is a possibility throughout the entire duration of the storm. Let's talk about the wind gusts. This would be very early on Friday morning, about 20 to 30 miles per hour. But notice why we're concerned about power outages. Wind gusts could be as high as 40 to 45 miles per hour throughout Friday morning, quickly tapering off as we get into Friday afternoon. That's when the winds should die down. That's when the storms should start to go away a little bit, and the rain should start to die off a little bit as well. As far as another aspect we haven't talked much about would be the tornado concern. For Wednesday night, there is a tornado risk for the foothills. We're watching that for you. Farther off into Thursday, we're looking more at the coastal Carolinas with a very high risk of showers and storms that could become tornadoes. And then for Friday, all of us across the Carolinas will have to keep an eye on that. All told, what are we expecting in the Triad area here in the Piedmont of North Carolina? Some impacts from gusty winds, of course, a threat of some power outages, a threat of a couple tornadoes, and certainly a threat of some flash flooding. That Friday morning commute really could be a tough one for a lot of folks trying to get off to work. It might be a good idea to avoid it if you have the luxury to do that. As far as the wind gusts across the state, highest in the west, there's no surprise about that. Really high winds across the North Carolina mountains, the Blue Ridge. This could do a number of things, obviously bringing down trees and power lines, but it also could rip off a lot of the leaves off the fall foliage too. Here in the Triad, that type of wind probably good enough to bring down a couple trees and power lines. Scattered power outages will be possible. Eastern North Carolina, probably not all that bad. As far as the rain totals, we talked about it. That'll be the worst out to the west, I should say. And in the Triad area, about an extra 2 to 3, maybe 4 inches of rain is possible on top of what has already fallen. Power outages will be widespread across the North Carolina mountains, but only scattered in the Piedmont area as we see it right now. We'll keep you posted as we get throughout the system. We have issued a WFMY News 2 Weather Impact Alert Day. What you can do to set yourself up to be in good shape: charge up your devices, be prepared for some power outages just in case. You won't regret doing that if you don't get an outage, but you'll remember and thank yourself if you did. As far as wind impacts as well, stacking up outdoor furniture, cleaning gutters, cleaning drains, that can all put you in a better position once the storm moves on in. By Friday afternoon and evening, the weather is improving, as we said. In fact, Saturday looks to be a pretty beautiful day. Lots of sun around the area, a little bit lower humidity with a high temperature of 80 degrees. Remember, you can always get the latest weather info on your WFMY News 2 app, WFMY Plus, or on WFMYnews2.com.